Welcome to another session of Ecosystem Engage, the Not So Daily Show. I'm your host, Amit Gupta, and I'm going to be hosting this special edition called the Expert Edition with two of Ecosystem's principal advisors, Dr. Alea Fairchild, based out of Belgium, and Dr. Kaushik Ghatak, based out of Singapore. What a wonderful session this is going to be with two PhDs who specialize in the areas of technology and supply chain, which is exactly what we're going to cover through this video. Welcome, Alea. Welcome, Kaushik.
The retail doctors are in, yes.
Great. So I know you guys have both been very actively reviewing and targeting the retail sector, or the new retail, as you like to call it. I know there's a lot of research that's been going on behind the scenes in that space. I wanted to get an opportunity for our viewers and users to be able to get some of those perspectives and insights from you. So to kick it off, I think one thing that's very, very clear is, as humanity, as societies, as businesses, we are seeing decades of shift get crammed into a matter of weeks. And what that means is that we're seeing patterns where certain things will change forever. Some will go back to being the way they used to be, there's no doubt, and we hope that they do. But some things will certainly change. And we know that technology is going to play a bigger role than ever to bring about some of those changes. So maybe I'll kick it off with you, Kaushik, because I know you're very passionate about this subject. And just for the benefits of our viewers, I also wanted to highlight that Kaushik is also a professor in some of the most premier universities in Asia Pacific, where he talks about supply chain and retail and other sectors. But Kaushik, my question to you to kick it off is, do you believe that the current crisis will change consumer preferences and sentiments in the mid to long term?
Yeah, thanks, Amit. And first of all, thanks for the nice introduction, and really glad to be here. When it comes to retail, one thing that comes to my mind is retail was anyway getting massively disrupted even pre-COVID. So the consumer preferences have been changing very rapidly, and alternative business models such as e-commerce have been really altering the business models that traditional retailers used to do at one point of time. So disruption and change in terms of consumer preferences for retailers is not new. But I think what is, as you rightly said, COVID has changed the way, at least for the last 2-3 months, the way we have been going about getting our getting the things that we need has been very different. So in the very short run, right now, our focus is essentially around essential retail, right? The food and groceries and so on and so forth, and not so much on non-essentials like luxury goods and other stuff. And as we get out of this situation, hopefully soon, I think with the short run, that focus will still remain, because on one hand, there is the reality of losing jobs and reduced disposable incomes. So cash will be king, and conservation of cash by all consumers will definitely be a key aspect for every consumer to consider, and that will impact the sentiments and the preferences. But I think what is going to be in the medium term, so hopefully we'll get out of this disposable income issue over the medium term. But I think from a medium term perspective as well as for long term, we have acquired certain habits of buying, being cooped up in our homes for so many days. And traditionally, psychologists say that if you do something for 21 days regularly, it becomes a habit, right? And we have had more than 21 days of doing that, of changing our way we buy things. And we have all started becoming more digital savvy. We have started, we are more open to now, giving our credit cards onto other platforms and buying and so on and so forth. So direct buying from home through e-commerce channels is a habit that I think will stay with us in times to come.
I'm
That
going to
would be
agree with you, but I'm
yeah,
also going to disagree on one certain point. I've seen so many flaws in e-commerce in the last month that I've never seen before in using it. Because of the delivery chain being broken, there's no guarantee you can get the product.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, therefore, people get concerned about where they're ordering from. Before, I wouldn't, if I've never heard from a website before, I'd still might order from it because I have my credit card backing up my risk. I have the possibility of cancellation. Now, I can't easily cancel if they've shut down their web shop or they can't deliver, or heaven forbid, I'm ordering from the other side of the planet. It may take a significantly long period of time to get it. So I'm buying differently. I would agree with you on that point, but I'm also buying more cautiously, knowing that I might have a hard time getting my money back or getting fulfillment. Do you see also?
I agree because you see what is happening is this crisis has tested everyone's supply chain capabilities, and that's true for e-commerce retailers also, right? I have had two incidences in the last 1 month where what I had bought, these people could not deliver in time, so I've had to cancel these orders. So I guess it then falls upon the retailers, both brick and mortar as well as the e-commerce retailers, and more so e-commerce now because there'll be more focus in getting their supply chains right in order to deliver to the promise that they're making. So,
and we're hitting at a bad moment because go back, we've been in this for several months now. That was at least here in Western Europe, spring season. Now we're heading right into summer. They've got the wrong stock. They've got rent payments due, inventory handling problems. They're going to have margin erosion because most of us are not willing to pay larger prices, so they're going to have to discount going forward, and they don't know what to do with their staff. So it's really a balancing act, and fortunately, this is why we're discussing it. Technology can come in and play a good role in aiding this, but it's almost like having airplanes out of position. We have inventory out of position.
I was going to touch on broad sets of technologies that are going to specifically impact the retail sector, and also the capabilities that retailers need to build to address these requirements. But given how passionate you both are about what you're discussing, I can sense that we need to get into the supply chain discussion now, right? Because I can sense that Alea has a lot of a lot of observations, and obviously you've been doing a lot of research on this subject. So I'm going to jump first into the supply chain discussion, and then we'll come to some of the other technologies that retailers can use to transform and enable a better recovery process. But so getting into the supply chain piece, Alea, we find, I suppose, that retailers themselves are finding themselves at the blunt end of the supply chain predicament in the current pandemic. I mean, what is your observation and your recommendations?
As Kaushik was saying earlier, that there's already been a real push to e-commerce anyway. Footfall was dropping on the high street, and the use of the the footprint of the retail landscape has been morphing for quite a while. U.S. shopping malls, for example, there's been a whole development towards dark stores and different utilization of space, because for retail, there's two really big costs. One is square meterage, how much space you have, which ties to inventory, and also how much revenue you can generate with the space you have, which is why the whole drive to e-commerce. But then the challenge being, if I cannot get my inventory sorted out together, I need to combine inventory management with local sourcing. So there's a lot of risk that was taken on during this period of time. And that problem with that risk is, as we saw with toilet paper hoarding, things did not pan out the way we thought they were going to. So they had to be very agile and adapt very quickly. And they're at the, I'm going to use the term value proposition. The value proposition of working with a retailer is it's local, it's centralized. I can get all my goods from one location, or most of my goods from one location, depending on the category. If I go for clothing or if I go for food, I can find most of what I need in one location. That centralization has been a convenience for it. And they can't get what you need, then you have to be more customer-centric and become your own shopping mall, which has been kind of interesting. I was joking earlier about my brother-in-law who's finding great ways to use wholesalers. People have had to repurpose themselves. people, organizations, firms that repurpose themselves as to what they actually provide. So that whole supply chain, we have the eggs, we have the chickens, but we don't have, and we have the people wanting them, but that connection in between is broken. So retail needs to add new relevance going forward. I don't know if Kaushik, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add something around, and again, retail, changing the supply chain changing. That will be a really good discussion to have shortly after this. But I just want to add on the risk side of things. One thing that I noticed, and based on talking to some of my friends in apparel and food and beverages industry, more so in apparel. You see, when we talk about risk management, the risks are coming from a supply chain perspective. There are we need to balance risks from the demand side risks and the supply side risks. All those both need to be managed well, right? What happened here in this case was because China was the first to be impacted, the supply side risk came to the forefront. And then people started, frantically looking for alternative sourcing. People started over ordering, build up stocks, because the main demand centers in Europe and US were going full steam ahead in beginning February, middle February, until it hit Europe in towards end of February and March, and then in the US, right? And then what happened? The demand side risks took over. So ultimately, and then people had ordered, but now there's nothing to sell. So what happened in this whole situation was that the classic bullwhip, in terms of the variations across these multiple tiers of very, very complex global supply chains, it just put all the things that you mentioned earlier, right, around inventory, mismatches, overstocking, understocking, stockouts. All of these things started happening because this whole system was out of balance. And again, this is a COVID doesn't happen. Hopefully, it doesn't happen very often, in the future. So these are, you can't really plan for them. But I guess the main learning around risk management from there is how can we have responses? How can we build in certain level of redundancies, maybe, which is costly, maybe a certain level of flexibility, which is more doable, and a culture of more collaborative engagement within my enterprise as well as with my trading partners, so that I can absorb these risks better.
And this is where technology comes into. We have the transparency between the collaborating partners as to what's going on. There were a lot of companies willing to produce product, but had no way of distributing it. And there were a lot of folks willing to take product on board, but they couldn't get the product. Really good example here in Belgium. Again, we all love discussing toilet paper. Obviously, we got cleared out, empty shelves for a while. And then what happened is they found, our large hypermarket found one source that was willing locally to produce consumer-oriented toilet paper, which we discussed the form factor is different. And all of a sudden now I came into the store to find one gigantic aisle full of toilet paper from one brand. And that was it. One reasonably generic brand, and they were able, and bulk packages of 24, which I don't tend to normally purchase, but that was your option. Almost like going to the Soviet Union of old times, here's the one product you can get. I don't care if you don't want it that way. That's the way you're going to get it. And then we've now gone back to having that diversity. But for a while, the agility of the retail partner was, let me find a local source. Clearly, there's a need. I don't care what the brand is. I'm going to meet my customer need. And the same with flour. We still have big plastic bags just marked flour, no labeling. I'm sure totally against EU, labeling rules. But there's flour. You can get flour now. So really looking at commodity buying, which was not the case before. The actual bundle we would have, whether it be, again, food, pharmaceutical, we would have a bundle. This is how economically they would look at purchasing in terms of a bundle. And now our bundles have totally changed. I was joking about the last time you put fuel in your car. Well, first of all, fuel prices have dropped. That's the good news. You can't take advantage of it because there's no place to go. We're totally spending differently. And it's not just the trends from COVID. We've stepped back and said, okay, what do we want to invest in personally now? And the retailers will have to adapt to their portfolios to address that. And the risk is you could be in the wrong place with the wrong offering. And we've previously had the ability with seasonality to shift agility if I'm manufacturing the wrong product. Now you don't have that time anymore. All of a sudden the stores will open at one point and you have a make or break given the fact you're behind on rent and behind on salaries to quickly sort it out. And this is where e-commerce is going to come as a benefit to amp up portions of the portfolio. And this is where collaboration, I'm going to search new and perhaps even more local partners, become hyper relevant and hyper local in how I go to market.
Yeah, so that also has its, a lot of talk going on in terms of uh, making sure that your supply chain, the suppliers are more under your control, and that's where the local discussion is coming.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's some elements that, I guess would determine that also, right? So for example, I was looking at some data that if an Apple iPhone is manufactured only in the US, it'll cost 2,000 US dollar upwards. So the fact that we have built these global supply chains based on certain levels of skill concentration and cost concentration is not going to go away, because customers are not going to pay more just to make sure that your retailers have the right portfolio of assortments available at the right time, right? So the cost pressures for the retailers will continue, and that will determine to what extent they can go local or to what extent they need to stay global. But then staying global, they would probably look at a lot of different options now. Instead of focusing on one particular region because of cost and skill concentration, but that's going to happen in mid to long term. As we know, such things cannot happen in a very short term, right? But
I was
over
thinking
time, I
very
think.
interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just saying that, just to finish that, I was saying that, so the local, being local, controlling risks will be paramount, but then that will be limited by the ability to deliver ultimately to the consumer at a at a cost at a cost that is palatable to them.
But the consumer preference point you brought up earlier is very interesting. I'm seeing, for example, in Australia, petitions for grocery stores to have Australian-made aisles, so products made in Australia. There's been a lot of pressure in terms of the protection of jobs to focus on
Yes.
locally
Yes.
created product.
Yes.
And I again, my hypermarket has a whole aisle area for regional products, trying to support regional industry. And because of what's happened, I think there's going to be, perhaps they're not willing to pay more money for it, but they are more aware that local provides local jobs. So there's going to be a real mix. And I see the bigger retail players as being almost like a coordination center, bringing in the global goods, but also making sure that there is a demand fulfillment for those who actually want to buy local as well. So being an outlet for a local producer, giving them a wider economy of scale.
Yeah.
So to speak.
No, you're right. And I think, Bain, there's a very nice article from Bain, which, outlines these three phases nicely. They're saying that the retailers, and that's applicable for any industry actually, at this time, they're in a protect mode. How can I protect my business? How can I make sure that I'm surviving? And then there'll be a recovery mode where you are now getting back to where you were before this crisis. And then there is a retool mode where you are really looking at how things have, how things have changed permanently, and what you need to do to retool yourself. So my point of view around the focus on local is, obviously when you have a crisis, you want to protect your own first, right? That's the natural reaction from anyone, and that is at an individual level, at a society level, community level, or at a country level. So the fact that there is an Australian aisle is a reflection of that sentiment, I think. But over time, as things hopefully go back to normal, I think the pressure and those sentiments will get slightly less priority. And again, the focus on getting most innovative product, the most innovative assortment at the right price at the right time would take precedence. And then we'll start looking at the globality of supply chain again.
I'm going to add one more comment. We were having a discussion earlier about delivery. I think the promise of delivery and the promise of when something is going to be available, that transparency of information is also going to be much more critical for retail going forward. If you have stock out, letting people know, well, it'll be available in 2 days. That level of transparency and trust, given the whole breakdown of the situation for several months, is going to be very critical. I've had a couple of different deliveries, and both parties made sure that I got it and signature was required. Although the person who was delivering it did not allow you to touch the package, they signed on your behalf, but there was acknowledgement that it actually arrived. And we in Belgium at least have had track and trace on food products for quite a while. We had a number of food scares. So knowing the traceability of the product and its origin is also going to be very important. So the information flow of goods, global, local, availability, traceability, that whole automation of that portfolio is going to become very important for relevance.
Agree, absolutely.
Yeah. So just, we talked about the fact that the sector will change, and it has to, right? Because our own patterns are going to change and shift. In terms of the in-store processes for retailers, what do you see? How do you see that changing with just a different level of, hygiene, compliance, and safety standards that are going to be implemented post-COVID?
You have a lot of issues with store operations. We're seeing now, for example, a number of things are outsourced. We've changed the process of entering a store. We've changed the hygiene of the store. We've changed the physical layout of the store. Some of that has been done in store, and some of that is done by outsourcing, by having security guards. So there's a combination of resources. So allocation of resources, allocation of labor, KPIs in terms of turnaround time, labeling of hygiene, for example, when the last time something was checked in terms of fruit and veg. These are all going to be mission critical tasks to automate. So someone's got to control what's going on from the point of view of, I'm going to call it a hygiene audit. Where are we on this? If I have a global chain, they're going to want to have certain standards to meet, not only for their shareholders, but just for compliance sake. Are you doing things properly? And that's going to require automation. That's going to require a lot of different tools, task management software as to, which is done in-house, which is done in the inventory area, what is done by an external party to manage that information flow.
Yeah, no, I agree that, and that's one of those permanent changes that we're going to witness in store, where consumers will expect that level of hygiene that they were not hitherto, they never demanded or were not used to, in terms of that distancing. And also, I think a lot of that's where, Amit, when we talk about the technology piece, we can talk about a lot of possibilities of technology providing that experience in terms of, that whole touchless
Yes.
retail experience.
Literally, I'm seeing people in the stores now. It's the whole contactless mobile, but also they realize if they self-scan, they don't have to wait in the long lines. So a lot more people are doing self-scanning at the grocery store because they can just hand the scanner and then no one's touching their food, and it's wonderful. They don't even let you touch your frequent purchaser card now. That's sort of this weird scanning activity that they don't want to touch that either. But you're seeing a lot of self-service, so self-service ordering, self-checkout, scan and go technologies, but also a lot of this is moderated by the device. I don't know when was the last time you guys washed your phone? I wash my phone now on a regular basis. I probably should turn it off when I do that, but okay. Oops. From that perspective, you're controlling, but in the process of controlling this now offers a lot of data, which you weren't getting before. And if I can connect to that data via, for example, my frequent loyalty card or an app, that's going to tie lots of things together and make a lot of wealth of information. So the self-scanning is going to give me that hygienic comfort, but it's also going to provide a lot of information on me. So am I willing to give that up? A lot of people don't think about that.
Yeah. So what does the next level of automation look like? I mean, is this the time for retailers to seize the moment towards that automation that we keep talking about? We've been talking about it for years now, and we know the technologies are there. Just a question of, streamlining and implementing them. Is this the time to do it?
I think the smart retailers are already doing and have been for a while, and they're going to add things like IoT, so you can see. Let's say, for example, I'm using the grocery store because we all eat. I want to go to the grocery store. I don't want to go wait outside for a long period of time. It could be bad weather. I could perhaps have someone high risk in my family. I could actually go and see on the app the level of the line, almost like you have at airport security in terms of how many folks are there. And I could decide for myself when I want to go. Or they could actually track the flow and suggest to me, AI, given my priorities, the best time I want to go to the store. We're trying to do that physically right now here, at least in Belgium. They're closing off parts of the streets so people can stand outside stores, which is not comfortable for anybody. No one wants to stand outside and wait. And they also don't know before they go if there's going to be a line or no line. So lots of information can be provided that I can self-serve my own experience, which will be interesting if they can keep it up to date. That's the interesting point.
Yeah, so you see, just adding on to what Alea said, retail industry has been one of the industries which has been fairly data intensive, right? Retailers have had the good fortune of getting a lot of data related to the customers and through loyalty programs, also through in-store movements. Their data acquisition systems and data analysis systems, when it comes to whatever is downstream for them in terms of consumers coming into retail stores, either online or physical, that processing has been good. They're good at it. And so more automation will definitely come in there, as we talked about in terms of improving the in-store experiences in physical stores as well as on online. But I think the other part of the automation that will come is in terms of that visibility of upstream and the work in terms of working with the upstream supply chain on getting, there'll be a lot of, for example, RPAs for invoice processing. We know how big a challenge is that, right? So I think so you see the retailers are in a stage where nothing has changed from consumer expectation point of view. Consumers are not going to give more leeway to retailers to serve them, right? So consumers are going to demand exactly the same level of perfection that they have been from the retailers at the same cost. Now, in order to make that set of innovative assortment being made available at the right time at a lower cost, if they don't get automation and cost efficiencies in on their upstream supply chain, that is going to be a killer for retailers.
I'm going to disagree for a point. I think it's going to actually, they're going to require more trust, more transparency.
We're going to require more.
Yeah,
we're going to require more, right? So that's what I'm saying. So if so there's a very interesting data point on how much is Amazon investing in digitalization vis-a-vis the average of the next top 10 retailers. And it is massive. It runs into billions of dollars over the next 5 years. So I think, Alea, we were talking about the same thing, that it is going to be an imperative for retailers to get automation and efficiencies in their upstream supply chain, but with the added challenge that now, in order to manage risk, you have to bring more flexibility, and flexibility means cost. So therefore, the impetus for automation will be much more for the retailers now.
And I'm going to bring in the concept of brands. There's certain brands who are opting out of these big platforms because they don't believe they're getting the lion's share of what they should be getting. So you have the Heinz, the Nikes, the PepsiCos now trying to go direct to the customer because they realize what the customer wants. And they want that data you're talking about. They want it direct versus filtered from the retailer. So they're actually creating bundles for the packages for the users to know more about what the user wants. And I see, again, anecdotal from personal experience, I see Amazon missing the point. They may have the volume, they may have the capacity, but they're not listening well enough these days as to what people are looking for. And what you're seeing advertised is more manufacturer supplier driven. It's becoming more push marketing and not pull marketing. And I'm going to see a shift, I think, of consumers saying, I'm going to take this into my own hands now because I have the technology to do so. I will go to the major retailers for commodities, for things I know I need. Specialty, I'm going to now shop. And I'm going to go direct to Nike. I'm going to go direct to certain players because they understand my need better and they're going to personalize my experience. And I think the retailers are going to miss a trick if they're just focused on volume to actually get that more impactful value experience, which people will pay more for. I think we're going to spend less in terms of actual number of objects, and we're going to actually invest more now in the value objects that are going to be more, I hate to use the word durable because I don't talk about like long-term usage, but more a presence in our life, that we're going to spend some more time looking for those objects. And we might therefore go to not exclusive dealerships, but we're going to go for people who know what they're talking about. And that's not necessarily, no offense, not necessarily Amazon's marketplace, but it's going to be somewhere that's going to give me some good ideas. And this is something I was talking about earlier today with a colleague. We're all now talking about technology usage. I would love to have a work from home bundle that has the proper lighting, the green screen. In essence, I could order the bundle that I can be online tomorrow. And somebody's missing a trick here to package this, that I would have everything I would need to be, podcast or video cast or Zoom worthy at this moment in time. And one of the first, things we're all going to go do is go to our local media mart or whatever and tech up as soon as we can. But there are some certain bundles you're not seeing. That creative thought process from a retailer, like a media mart or a hypermarket, to walk in and say, everything's falling apart on you. Here's the bundle you need to upskill yourself.
And Alea, you just touched upon a topic favorite of mine.
Oh, good.
We are all victim of our siloed baggage thinking. Retailers think products; they don't think solutions.
Sure, they think product category. Yeah,
they think product categories, right? So it is it's a culture change. Mm-hmm. And also, you talked about direct to consumer, and that's that is inevitable. I think over time we'll see more and more of that. But one thing that we have to remember is the manufacturers also need a culture change, because they have not been retailers. And being a retailer is very different from a margin expectation perspective, from a supply chain management perspective, and from providing that experience perspective than what Amazon, Walmart's, they have just become really good at. So I think that culture change, while we talk about technology, the culture change is, intimately tied to managing all of these transformations.
Yeah. That's such a good point. And, if you consider, if I look at the retail sector, so one of my favorite pastimes on the weekends is going to supermarkets. I love to touch and feel the different produce brands out there, right? And I want to go to a supermarket that actually offers all the variety. So, because I want to pick best of breed, dairy needs to come obviously from New Zealand, and, meat needs to come from New Zealand, but there are other things that can come from other places. Chocolate can come from Belgium, for example, right?
Thank you.
But as I think about what you guys were talking about, right, retailers are going to have to completely shift their thinking 180 degrees, because the infrastructure costs are going to change, possibly. Are they going to need the same degree of space for the supermarkets or for the retail outlets? What happens when you have a lot of automation go in? Then there's an impact on people. How do you redeploy people, and how do you reskill talent, and where do you put that talent? And if you're going to cut down on people and focus more on automation and digital, your customers will also expect not more for that enhanced experience through technology, but less, in fact, right? They will expect that products will cost lesser, because they will see that your physical infrastructure costs have gone down, your people costs have gone down. So, we talked about supply chain that gets the products to the store. We talked about the in-store automation experience. And my question to you guys is, with this blend of the physical and digital experience coming in, customer experience is going to become even more critical, right? Mm-hmm. You will need to bring a customer into your store. So you gave the example of the apparel manufacturers, Kaushik, and you gave examples of retailers, Alea. We know that 5G is just around the corner, right? And we've been talking about immersive technologies. We've been talking about, AR, VR. What role is that going to play in the future of the new retail?
I'm going to highlight a point that he was making earlier about solutions versus products. The retailer, or let's call it the retail space, which could be both physical and virtual, is going to offer me to blend different things together to create solutions. So I'm not going to be shopping for a product anymore. I'm going to be shopping for an outcome or a solution. And to do that, for example, IKEA, with the placing of the couch in your home, I'm going to use technologies to allow me to create a solution for myself. And where the retailer specialty is going to come in is to have all the different components or SKUs involved in creating that solution. And if they don't have them themselves, they have upstream access to where those sit. So they can help you, almost like a systems integrator does for an IT situation. They can help you build that solution. For example, as we're joking about being, camera ready, I can get you the lighting, the green screen, and the hair products and the makeup. So all of a sudden now you have that bundle, but I may not be a specialist in any of those one elements, but I can pull them together for you and create that solution.
Yeah, so no, I agree. I think it will be, Alea, as you rightly said, these are fantastic opportunities for retailers, both online as well as in store, to create that solution experience. What you see, when you walk into IKEA, when you see that kitchen, it's a full-fledged solution in front of you, right? Everything is right out there. So, so technology will help you, especially AR, VR. I can see such massive use cases of AR, VR in creating that solution experience, right? So huge fillip to customer experience. But I also think that, this was, again, not really new, right? AR, VR application in providing in-store experience has been, a lot of retailers have been trying it out, right? For example, you walk into an apparel store and based on your physical, characteristics and based on your certain preferences in terms of color, you don't have to wear the, clothes, right? You can see the clothes on you and you can choose. So all of this was already happening. I think what will happen with post-COVID and with 5G, to your point, Ramit, is it will just get imploded in a very short time frame. So
it'll get industrial.
And mobile is going to be a big part. I can self-identify not only what my color preferences are, but what I've already bought from you. So it can start matching up different aspects of my user journey together to give me a better experience. And I'm self-selecting by carrying a device that they can recognize who I am. Even though I don't give them a customer number, they have enough information on me and also where I've been looking. I have the trail of where I've been in other stores, and they can help you comparison shop then. If it's on price, they can see that you've been in the Aldi and you've been in the Lidl, and they can start showing you, and here's my price compared to theirs. So it's going to enable you to do more comparisons.
And I also think that on the online, the application of VR will be huge. I think we'll soon see very different websites from these retailers, where they are taking you through a journey, through an experience, and getting you to put items on your shopping cart. So that traditional shopping cart model of having that basket will probably change.
Oh yeah. And there's going to be a lot more suggestions in terms of machine learning and AI as to what you've been looking at, combinations, suggestions, looking at previous preferences, but also moving you beyond your comfort zone, showing you products that you wouldn't have looked at, for example.
Yeah. And look, sorry, please.
Go ahead.
No, I was just
going to say, all of a sudden you find that you've become pregnant, all of a sudden it will suggest maternity things you had never even were aware of that you would need. So helping educate you. And
given, you talked about the big marketplaces like Amazon and the likes, and we know obviously the brand retailers and the in-store retailers. But perhaps given the conversation, I did an interview last week with the chief digital officer of one of the major telcos, and one of the key use cases that's really key to them from a consumer standpoint is the use of AR, VR in retail, right? And so if the retailers themselves don't adapt to this quickly enough, you will see a new emerging set of players coming into this sector, because once you got digital in there, it becomes so easy to disintermediate, right? And
speaking of which, but there's another possibility we're going to see here. Like I mentioned, we're out of season. You're going to see people needing to liquidate inventory very quickly, and there's another good reason to show, AR, VR in terms of massive amounts of products that need to be liquidated. They'll have to show them.
Yeah, no, again, and also I think, so we talked about technology, and technology is there. With 5G, it just, makes it faster and, more readily available. But again, I think a lot goes back to the culture, because retailers have been operating with such thin, wafer thin margins. That investing in something of value is something that doesn't come naturally to them. So, putting up that convincing case for technology creating value in terms of higher revenue, reduced customer churn, increased loyalty, and the benefits of that in the reasonably mid to long term is something that the someone in the retail industry needs to do well. The technology sellers who are selling there needs to do it very well, and over time, until that mindset is handled, you'd see these technologies not being used much.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree slightly. I think there's going to be two tracks. There's going to be the track of people adding value, and there's the track of people adding commodity volume. So I'm not going to necessarily go to the same place to buy my laundry detergent and toilet paper that I might go to buy my quality meat. If I'm looking for price as the driver set, people are going to expect rapid turnaround, low prices, but also a lot self-serve, because they'll see self-serve as the possibility to reduce cost. Whether you're going to see the knowledge, expertise, value, AR, VR, high touch, hypersensitive is going to be the value products. And it may be the same company under two different streams. So technology allows you to divide those potentially.
So you could really segment your customers and provide differentiated experience for each segment based on how much they will pay for it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
oh, great. And I just wanted to highlight for the benefit of our viewers that Alea has just also recently published a report on the impact on the hospitality sector. So do look out for that on the platform. And Kaushik published a report on the impact of 5G on the supply chain. And he has actually looked at a couple of use cases that have emerged out of Singapore. So do check those out. I did want to end this on something that's very close to all our hearts, and I genuinely believe where we are today is not just an economic crisis. It is first and foremost a humanitarian crisis. And the economic crisis is a fallout of that. So as we deal with come to terms with the challenges facing society and the economy in general. There are also areas where I think technology can play a big role in alleviating some of the socioeconomic challenges. One such theme that we have been discussing for a few years is food sustainability, right? Among the various, the various SDGs outlined by the UN, and food shortage became a reality in this pandemic. It really did. In every country, people were panicking and people were concerned. And, I wanted to get a sense from you both on, since we've talked about supply chain, one of the biggest challenges in the food, from produce, from farm to fork, as they say, one of the biggest challenges is a broken supply chain. And if you can fix that, you can alleviate a whole bunch of issues relating to hunger in the world. So any thoughts on what could governments and industry, where could they come together and build in a framework that will actually leverage technology to alleviate some of these challenges?
Yeah, actually, Amit, we'll talk about technology, but in terms of you mentioned the public-private partnership. So one of the good things in this crisis has been that our food supply chains have sustained themselves. We have not, the crisis for food has mainly been in our minds, but not in terms of physical stock availability, right? The main stock unavailability has been in terms of toilet papers, but not in terms of essential food, right? And there is a classic example, and Amit, this is from New Zealand, so I'm sure you relate to that. You relate to that very much. You see, what happens for many of the food products is that while cargo freights take food sometimes, but also it goes with passengers. Now, when this COVID came, New Zealand, as you expect your meat and dairy to come from New Zealand, many in the world do, right? So the shipments from New Zealand carrying meat and dairy now we're not finding the flights because the flights did not have passengers. So what the New Zealand trade minister did was he said that, look, I will fund the airlines for the missed passenger fares. Send those flights out so that the export revenue of New Zealand is not impacted. And that's such a great example of making sure that the government is intervening at the right stage to make this a sustainable venture. It is not sustainable in the long run, obviously, but then we're not talking about a crisis, which is going to be in the long run, right? I found it such a fantastic example of partnership.
I'm seeing something slightly different in the sense that we go back to the whole toilet paper discussion. 75% of what's being produced is being produced for the commercial industrial sector. And that sector went away, whether it be toilet paper, Coca-Cola took a hit, a lot of chicken and egg production was all meant for hospitality, restaurants, institutions, hospitals. And we've had to disintermediate. The products have been there, the demand has been there, but that connection has been missed. And we've had to rebuild those connections. And some of the platforms we exist, like, for example, Facebook, connecting farmers who are offering their products, saying, hi, I've got some perfectly good, meat and we're butchering it, but we need to get it to people, and recreating those networks. Is it feasible in the long term? No, in terms of just the volumes, but you're seeing a connectivity created by technology, not just platforms like Facebook, but also cities were actually explaining who's doing takeaway, etc. The connectivity between the people who are creating the product and the people who want to consume it, that whole intermediation chain was disrupted, and they're creating new forms of relationship where people are starting to realize now where their food is produced, not just by country origin, but also getting in touch with the people who are doing the production. So that whole relationship with organic farming, again, this is the higher end value stuff, but people are now connecting directly with where the food is being produced, and making it more sustainable because of their interest in better quality of food.
Yes, I agree. That will happen in the definitely long term, because things about the blockchain coming into the food supply chain, right? Traceability, those things are so important. So farm to fork traceability, visibility is definitely, and that's where all technology comes in. But surprisingly, I was really happy to see that in this part of Asia, we didn't have a food crisis. Food was, I'm talking about India, I'm talking about Singapore, I'm talking about Southeast Asia. Food, all essential food products were available at the right time. And that has been possible. How? Because while this, the movement of goods and, services have been severely restricted, but governments have ensured that for these essential items, these supplies should get the best attention and should reach to the consumers. But in the long run, you're absolutely right. I think, again, as we become more digital savvy, this whole coronavirus thing has also been a lesson in sustainability, right?
A wake-up call.
A wake-up call, right?
Absolutely.
So as that awareness hopefully has increased in all of us, our demand for understanding the source of where it is being produced, how it is being produced, who is producing them, what is their living condition, is becoming extremely important. So, and technology can really help there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, I think that's a topic for another time, because I think we can go really deep into the role of blockchain in this whole food supply chain, because just like we are seeing malicious attacks on the cyber world with more and more people being online, there's a huge risk of I guess malicious attacks or malicious products being sold to people where they may not have the ability to ascertain whether it comes from a legitimate source or not. So I think that's a separate topic, and we'd love to have another session on that. But our time's up. I've really enjoyed listening to you both, and I always do every week when we talk. And it was a great opportunity for us to bring some of that out to our customers, users, and viewers. And thank you again, Dr. Alea Fairchild, joining us from Belgium, principal advisor with Ecosystem, and exceptionally passionate about the role of technology in transforming industries. And Dr. Kaushik Ghatak, who is a PhD in supply chain and a long-term visionary in the technology industry. And now we're fortunate to have him as a principal advisor. But Kaushik is also a professor in some of the most premier universities in Asia Pacific. So thank you both. I wish you all, stay well, and for our viewers as well, stay well and stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Alea.
Thank you both.